Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are tuning in to listen. One day I will get that line right. My name is Anthony Scala, and this is Text of the Roundtable, Episode 3. Now, in line with this podcast and the intention behind this podcast, we're always trying to learn and improve podcast to podcast. And so, in light of that, we're actually going to be changing things up this week. We're going to be taking a little bit of a step back away from the focus on cyber news and IT news and really focus in on the IT and cyber industry. So for the conversation this week, I've pulled back in some of my friends, and then they were here on the first pod, Pierce Boucher and Nick Soulos. Just as a quick reminder, Pierce is an IT manager for a biotech, as well as Nick is out on the front lines doing desktop support for a property management company. So there are fewer people more in tune with the IT and cyber industry as it stands currently than those that I have right in front of me. Hey, good afternoon, guys. Great to see you again.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be here.
Yep,
Awesome.
Great to be here again.
We are going to have a really great conversation today. We have three pretty meaty topics that we're going to dive into. And so I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off here. The importance of passion for IT and cyber. This is one of the big topics we're going to hit today. It's a really important topic. And what we're going to be focusing on is how do you keep it? How do you reignite it if it's gone away? How do you prevent yourself from getting a little bit too jaded in the IT and cyber space? Here to kick us off with this one, Pierce, you want to get us rolling?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think, kind of the big topic about like keeping passion in technology. I think it's really easy to be passionate about something at the beginning, right? But it's easy to get jaded. I think all of us can attest to the fact that, even a few months in, there are little frustrations build. They make you kind of, they create animosity between you and the job, right? Not even you and other people necessarily. And for me, I think that's a big thing that I've had to learn in my career is how do I keep that passion that I had, when I was learning everything, right? And that's kind of, for me, that's actually how I figured out my way through it is by continuing to learn, like continuing to look for that next goal and striving for that next goal and that next learning, whether that's leadership-based learning or actual technical learning, or just learning about a new environment, new technology, getting to know a new group of people, and learning the challenges of working, through large issues or large projects with that group. And so that's at least that's what works for me, right? And I think that's kind of the thing is everyone has their own, I could talk about this for so long. Everyone has their own, way of approaching passion and the things that work for them as well. And that's its own learning process, right? So I think that's one thing I try to impart upon people that I speak with about career growth and that kind of thing is, you got to find what keeps you passionate and that will vary, but you have to find it. Otherwise you're going to be, you're going to be burning out quick and you're not going to know how to get yourself back into it. So yeah. That's my take.
Well, and you hit some really good points there. And I think that's a really great way to have that kind of focus to keep that passion. But I want us to also to back up a little bit. Passion for IT cyber. Why is it important?
It's a good question.
I think it's important because, like Pierce was saying, like you're going to have those moments where you feel discouraged. You feel like, maybe you're not cut out for it, or you're just getting frustrated with certain aspects of your job over and over, and it does start to build up. But yeah, it is very important to have that core and that foundation of the passion, loving what you do at its base so that you can, use that to push through these roadblocks that you're going to run into first, like, cause you will run into them. I guarantee that. So it is very important to have that kind of self-assurance almost that like, yes, I know that I love what I do and that is enough to get me through these challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely. The passion really comes into play when you are hitting adversity. Is that exactly like you said, Nick? That's what helps you push through. Now, this is something that I actually tell to those that I mentor all of the time, especially those that are just getting into IT and cyber. Maybe they're making a career pivot. Maybe they are just coming out of school and they really want to get into IT or cyber. The first thing that I say is, we need to take a beat here. We need to take a second. And I need you to reflect. Do you have the passion? Do you have the interest? It's one thing to say it. It is much easier to say it than to actually feel it. And this is, I really try to make sure that my mentees are going through this self-reflective process where they can really identify, is this right for me? Because if you don't have that foundational interest in computers, that foundational interest and passion for learning, for continuously developing and working within these technical systems, this career field is going to chew you up and spit you right back out. Because of exactly what you were saying there, Nick, is that adversity comes into play. I can say from experience, if I didn't have a passion for cybersecurity, oh man, I'd be burnt out so quickly because you have to stay up to date so frequently. I'm on news sites, I'm getting threat intel feeds, and a lot of this stuff is not the happiest stuff to read. It's not the stuff that makes you feel good about humanity. You're learning about e-crime groups. You're learning about different vulnerabilities that are now being exploited by threat actors and adversaries. And so you have to be interested in that, or it will just start to slowly chip away at your soul. And so that is really where passion for IT and cyber, really rooted in this base natural interest in computers and computer systems, come in. And now diving back in, and Pierce, I want to send it back to you for this one because you had some really great points for maintaining that, because passion is not a static thing. It is evolving and growing. What are some of those, you mentioned like finding that next goal, finding that next learning opportunity. Maybe give us some examples of times where you've felt some struggle, but what's helped you pull out of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, one thing you were saying about, the, you have to have the passion for kind of the base level, right? And if it can be, I think it can be just a job, right? But you have to figure out where your wins come from, right? Because a lot of time, this is a winless field a lot of the time, right? Like, or it feels winless, right? And and what I mean by that is, that satisfaction you get from having somebody recognize that there was a job well done, or that you stopped a major incident or something like that. Like those big, I really had a huge impact moments. Those are pretty rare, right? And at least in my experience, and that's not for everybody. I think at different jobs and different companies, you'll go through different things, but I don't know. I wanted to touch on that because I feel like that what I wanted to get at is you have to find that spot, right, where you get the satisfaction from. It's the same as any job, right? What actually drives you to get up out of bed, go there every day and do it for 8+ hours a day? And I think a lot of things about, like, especially desktop support or end user facing roles, a lot of the wins come from, people recognizing that you help solve the problem, right? Or something of that nature. And then in engineering, it can be, oh, I really nailed that deployment, things like that, right? That can kind of drive you. So a moment that I had that I really struggled in was when I was transitioning between engineering and management. And so I was kind of at a point where I felt like I had a really good grasp on how to implement technology and how to manage the implementation and how to do that well, right? How to prepare for the various outcomes that there might be, how to prepare people for what their expectations should be with that project. And then as I kind of stepped into management and I took on more of the actual project management side of it, as opposed to just the engineering and the expectation setting and figuring out the right thing to do, I kind of found myself a little bit lost because I felt like I didn't know. I was losing that. I was like, man, I'm not as good at this as I thought I was. And I really started to lose the passion for doing the implementations. And that was a big part of my self-identity in tech was, knowing how to do something and then executing on a large scale. So think network implementations or, like, migrations to new network gear, or implementation of a new storage system and a migration from an old system, things like that. And that's where I really started to lose passion at that moment for what I was doing, is because I identified so much with the actual implementation that when I started to falter because of my preparation, I kind of had a little bit of an identity crisis, and that really messed with the passion that I had for the job. It made me stop wanting to put in 100%. And the way I got out of that was by figuring out other things that I felt like were wins, right? And a lot of those came on the management side, which is where I really kind of learned, hey, I do actually like management, right? I like the people aspect of it, and that's where I find a lot of my wins is in the interpersonal relationships. So for me, the way I got out of it was finding something else that also fed my care, so to speak, right? The things that I care about on a daily basis and what drives me to get up and go to work. So yeah, that's kind of that was a big moment for me. That was a big moment for me for sure.
No, absolutely. When you're going through, especially major career changes or job changes, you're going to be hitting adversity. There's change. And it is in those times that it's the most important that you're identifying your routes essentially out of this pit of despair that you can find yourself into. I mean, I've gone through several instances in my career where I'm either so burnt out or I'm so just tired of whatever I might be dealing with in my day-to-day job at that time. I don't want to touch a computer when I get home. I'm not that interested, or I start having trouble actually keeping up with things, like updated news and everything like that. That's completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that everyone goes through that. And it's about defining your own strategies that work for you, that reignite that flame, that reignite that passion to continue to drive in this direction, and as well as the interest. You know, I went through a long period of time in my career where I was working on computer systems. This was back when I was engineering. And I was working on computer systems 10 to 12 hours a day. And so I didn't want to touch any technology when I got home. But at the same time, I was getting quite a bit of it, and I still enjoyed the work. But what I did notice was I was just so burnt out at that point. Some of the more fun pieces of technology that I got to play with on my own time, they started to fall off. You know, once I got through that, I identified that I found things in my active day-to-day job that I could set goals on. I could really look forward to find those bits of gratification. That's helped me kind of pull out of it. And then as I continued to progress through my career, you know, still leaning in and working as hard as I can. But I got to a point where I wasn't working that much anymore. I wasn't working on systems that much anymore. And all of a sudden, my passion for computers came rushing back in as soon as I wasn't doing the actual work 12 hours a day. Now, you had also said something in there that I wanted to hit on, which was IT. And you definitely, you hear this quite a bit. IT can really be a thankless job.
Can
And
be.
that
Absolutely.
can add to the overall stress or adversity that you're feeling, because no one calls IT when everything's working right. They only
Definitely.
call IT when there's an issue. And oftentimes, that issue is your fault. It doesn't matter if it is your fault or not. To the user, it's your fault, and you've got to get it fixed. And if it's interrupting them, then that's even a bigger of an issue.
Sure.
And you are only seen there in the moment of like you're coming because there's a problem. And it's really easy, depending on the organization and the culture that you're in, that IT kind of gets associated with the problems. But at the same time, also depending on your culture, sometimes it's in the environment of IT are the heroes, and they come when something breaks and they always fix it. So it depends on the environment that you're in. But something I would say is that is pretty consistent across the entire industry is that at least at some point you will feel to some extent that it is a thankless job because you're just getting
Right.
called with problems, and it's just frustrating.
Right. I
Now,
mean, maybe that is what, feeds you, right? Is the fact that you get to come in and fix a problem when no one else can.
mhm.
And the fact that somebody's mad, maybe that doesn't bother you, right? And I feel like I've definitely met people like that where they're like they've, I think a big path in IT is like a good jumping from desktop support to infrastructure to then whatever else you might want to do after that. But I've definitely met like career, desktop support engineers that like they just love that. That's their thing, and that's why they stayed doing it, is because that's just that meshed with them really well. So it's not to say that I don't you can't get there with desktop support and being the one that goes and fixes issues, and that's kind of that's your thing. But um, I think for a lot of us, and maybe Nick, you could shed some light onto this as well, is like I get burnt on that. I can say for sure. So
Yeah, no, it it drags sometimes, and it, especially if it's the same people having the same or similar issues over and over. You go fix it every time, and they're like, okay, cool, just back to business as usual. Like, not even a thank you. There's no necessarily, there's no correction on their end for like what they were doing that was causing the issue, and sometimes it can feel like you're not getting through to them, or you're talking to a wall almost, because you'll spend all the time that it takes for you to resolve the issue. You'll explain to them, hey, this is what I did, this is how I solved the issue, this is what was causing it. If you can just do X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, and C that you've been doing, we can avoid this in the future. And they'll just say thanks, and immediately go back to doing exactly what it is they were doing before, which, sure, that's their prerogative. And really, at the end of the day, that's why we're here, is to fix things when they break.
I mean, it does help when users restart their system more than once a month.
That is true. That is true. That helps. That helps a lot. But really, I mean, what I've come to learn is, at the end of the day, like, service desk is a customer service job primarily, and a tech job secondary. It's, anyone can learn the technical skills that it takes to be able to, work a service desk job, but you can, you can try, you can train and help people improve, but you can't teach that fundamental level of how to, provide service in a like friendly manner, how to communicate well and effectively in a polite and professional way with these users when tensions are high. Because a lot of the time tensions are high. They're having an issue. Maybe they have a very important presentation coming up later the week, or a project that's due very soon. And when things aren't working properly the way they need to, that builds a lot of stress on them. And sometimes they can end up taking it out on you inadvertently. But it is, it's important to sort of build up that thick skin, and also kind of be able to take a step back and really look at things as a third party would, and be like, okay, they're not upset at me personally, they're upset at the situation, and it's just taking a lot of their energy and their mental capacity. So cut them some slack.
You hit on a really good point there that I wanted to double back on. Desktop support, these kind of help desk roles, you commented that they're much more a customer service focused role, and then technical second. And I think that that's exactly where they sit. I think you're completely right. Because if you think about it, the desktop support roles, this is where we're pulling people into the industry. This is where we're pulling people oftentimes from customer service based roles, because that's what we're looking for. Is, do you know how to politely handle support and customer service for users? Because beyond that, the technical can be trained. And so that is really where help desk sits, is you need to have that interpersonal, be able to have that customer service. And then that's where you're also building up the technical that gets you to the later roles that are deeper and deeper into the technical. And with that, you kind of see the gradient of user support or user interaction fall off as the technical increases as well. So I want us to be cognizant of time here and move on to our next topic. But just to recap really quick, I want to make sure that the listeners know passion is incredibly important in IT. You need to make sure that you're interested before you dive into the career field, because if you're not, it's not going to go well. Also, wavering passion is normal in the job. You're going to encounter it. You're going to have times where you are gung-ho ahead on computer systems, IT, cyber, whatever it may be. There are going to be other times where you are burnt out, and finding that passion and getting that to drive you is much more challenging. And in those scenarios, from what we've talked about today, find your next goal, find your next initiative, find that next stepping stone for you, set your sights on that, and drive towards that. When your own fire behind you for IT and cybersecurity isn't feeling like it's strong enough to push you forward, find that next piece and crawl towards it. Drive towards that next piece when your passion's not driving for you.
And if I could jump
yeah.
in real quick, just with some
absolutely.
little more emphasis of my own on something that Pierce was talking about earlier. I do think it is very, very important to, as he was saying, find a way to get those wins, because that will also be a huge part of helping you carry through those tough times when you're feeling fatigued, you're feeling burnt out. Like, being able to look at what you've done, over the course of the day and be like, hey, I did a really great job with that. Like, that felt great to solve this problem or to help this user or anything, whatever it is that you tackled, and being able to draw that positivity and satisfaction from that is what's going to get you through the day to day.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, that's a great point. Both of you, find that next win. Take it. It's a saying that I say all the time. We take the dubs where we can get them. Doesn't matter how big or how small, but when you get a dub, you take it. All right, we gotta hit our next topic here, and very much related, and I think it's also pretty topical for where we're at in the industry right now. It's pretty rough. The challenges of the current IT and cyber job market. Now, we all live in it. We've seen the market. We've heard the stories. We've seen the news articles. The IT and cyber market is pretty rough right now. But at the same time, we also hear the same calls of there's a labor shortage in cyber. We need more people in IT. There are open IT jobs open. What's going on?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think it's both undersaturated and oversaturated at the same time. And something that I've kind of found in my experience, both in just researching the job market and applying and interviewing, is it seems like the lack of, or what we're missing and why there are so many available jobs, is specific expertise that companies are looking for. Whether that's like, for example, I've seen a few different job postings for IT management roles that are, kind of combo roles. They're, people management, and department management, but also they want technical and engineering skills to kind of go with that. And and that's kind of an interesting one, because management specifically, you kind of split. You don't generally do both. You kind of end up having, there's a fork in the road. You end up having to go one way or the other. So I think that's something that's really interesting. Things like that kind of cropping up. But from the engineering side, what I've seen is like, just not like people not, it seems like postings that are either for a specific technology that they want experience with, or kind of a more, I guess, like burgeoning part of technology where like it's AI, it's really heavy AI focused or something like that, and they're looking for somebody certified in those areas, but maybe not a ton of people are certified in those areas yet. So at least that's kind of what I'm seeing is a bit of both. But I think at the same time now might be seeing the effects of people being told, all right, the market's saturated, maybe don't look into IT over the last 2-ish years. And we're seeing kind of some, lower level positions crop up as well that are going unfilled because there aren't enough candidates or talent out there for them, or that's not where people want to start. So it's kind of hard to tell. I'm not really sure which is which. I also haven't really done much research on actual like market statistics and stuff like that. So I don't know what, how many people are out there and applying and that kind of thing. But
yeah, this is what we're seeing from our perspective in the industry. And so, yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying. You have these kind of combo roles that are looking for the unicorn employees that can design, architect, and implement your infrastructure while managing your team effectively and probably managing your budget. And don't forget the risk management and mitigation.
Of course.
Like all
and
of these
security
things
response
combined.
and
Exactly.
Right.
And then exactly what you're saying, we've been saturated for a while now, the IT market as well. But I think that there are definitely roles open. It's also around finding the way to get into the market, which I know that we are going to talk about here in just a second. I'm about to go on like a monologue around cybersecurity because I could talk about this for days. But before I do, I wanted to open it up to Nick as well. What have
Yeah.
you seen? What are you feeling like the cyber job market? What's going on?
I mean, I've been seeing a lot of kind of like what Pierce was describing, where there's a lot of very specific skills and specific tech stacks that employers are looking for, and I think there may also be some sort of disconnect between the team that is looking to fill the role and then the recruiter, like the talent acquisition person who is tasked with finding the candidates, because they're not familiar with the maybe the terminology or the actual technology that's being used. They just know the words and the description that were given to them by the hiring team. So let's say they're looking for a security analyst. They want someone who has 3 years of experience with Splunk, and I've got 3 years of experience with Sentinel, which to the hiring manager, they understand that, yeah, those are both SIEM tools. Like they do more or less the same thing, but then a recruiter might see that and be like, oh, well, that's not Splunk. You don't know, you don't have the skills that we're looking for, when in reality, all that it is just a different interface to do the same things. And so I think there's definitely a bit of a disconnect there, and yeah, it's causing confusion, I think, both on the parts of the companies that are trying to hire as well as the candidates that are trying to get into these roles.
No, I completely agree with you. I think so. What we're hearing, you have those unicorn roles, you have those hyper specialized technical roles. You have, there's some gaps going on in the lower tier as well currently, and then you also have this disconnect between non-technical recruiters recruiting for technical jobs. I myself, I've had good and bad experiences with recruiters in my career. Generally, when you find a very technical, dedicated recruiter, they're a little bit more in tune with things, but that's because that's who they recruit. But when you're working with a more generalized recruiter or a recruiter that spans multiple industries, that's where you can sometimes see some of the gap in understanding for our specific industry. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to monologue here for a second because I could talk about cyber and the cyber talent gap all day long. To me, and being a director of cyber, I've managed cyber teams before, I've hired for cyber roles before, and what I've seen pretty consistently throughout the industry, as well as all the industry events that I go to, is there is a not a labor shortage, there is a talent gap for cybersecurity. There is a whole class of aspiring cybersecurity professionals that have come out of school with the thought or understanding that they're going to be able to get a job right out of college. And, maybe they have college and a cert or something like that. And specifically within cyber, within IT, that's generally where the route that you would take. You get a degree, maybe you get a cert, you start a help desk job. That is a more normal route that I have seen. But in cyber, that's not enough. Cyber is a specialization of IT. If you don't have that IT backbone experience, now, while not impossible, it is going to be incredibly difficult to get a role. Because I will say it right out here, I'm a hiring manager that will not hire a cybersecurity professional that doesn't have a backing in IT. Because, or at least some sort of technical role. I can't say, IT as a whole, because I actually have hired someone that didn't have IT in their background, but they were actually working on repairing ECUs and car computers. So still a technical background. And you know what I hired them into? Was a cybersecurity intern role. So that is kind of where we're at, is we need to augment this understanding that a lot of these aspiring professionals have, that there are a million cyber jobs out there and that they're qualified for it. I really think that that's the gap, because yes, there are a ton of available cybersecurity jobs, but the people that are applying to them more often than not don't have the requisite skills and experience to be effective at that job. And that is really comes from a foundation in IT. How can how can I expect you to know how to protect my environment if you haven't managed an environment, if you haven't performed user support or technical work within an environment, if you don't know how an enterprise network works? That is a major concern. And that's what a few years in IT really equips you with, working in those environments. And that helps you move in that direction. So in terms of the cyber market, I don't think that there's necessarily a labor shortage. I think that there's a talent gap because those that are applying for the roles are not fully qualified and have been misled, quite honestly, in their preparations and their development. They've been misled to think that getting into cyber is going to be easier than it actually is. So on that whole front, my biggest recommendation to anyone listening, if you want to get into cyber, start in IT. Get a job in IT, do a few years in IT, lean in, work as hard as you can, and while you're there, keep doing the cyber stuff. Keep going for cyber certs. Keep working on cyber labs. Keep working on Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. Build out your cyber skills while you're also building out your IT. You get 3 years into an IT career, you look like a little bit of a weapon as an analyst because you have all of this backing. I'm going to go back to that employee that I referenced that I hired didn't have an IT background. He didn't, but he had some technical in his background, and he had a website with all of his cyber exploits on it, all of his Try Hack Me medals, all of his Hack the Box accomplishments, all of the labs that he had done. And that was what got him in front of me. And again, remember, this is for an intern role. And the reason why the requirements are so high in cybersecurity is because the liability and the responsibility is so much higher than even in IT. In IT, mistakes are celebrated. In IT, mistakes are an opportunity to learn. That's how you grow. Okay, maybe if you take delete an 80 forest, you're in a bad spot, and that maybe not a learning opportunity there. But
most mistakes
are learning opportunities, and you get to really grow and develop. Once you get into cyber, you make a mistake, that's a breach. That's money going out of your client's environment, the money going out of your organization's environment. That is potential reputational damage. The responsibilities, not to mention the legal liabilities that coincide with cyber, are so much higher than IT that really that foundation in IT to build the requisite experience is so important. That's really where I see that the talent gap in cyber. And then now in terms of IT, I agree with you guys on all of your points. I think that those are all elements of it. They are also mirrored in cyber to some extent. We still have the cyber roles that are these unicorn roles that they want you to be able to architect a program and implement it and manage and everything like that. Well, and we also have those roles that are super monolithic, that are very focused on a single technology, like IAM. I've seen posts for director of IAM, which, granted, big enough environment, I understand why you would need someone like that. But when the entire role is spec'd out of you must have been an IAM engineer your entire life. There aren't actually a ton of IAM engineer roles when you compare to normal IT engineering. And then that's also where you can hit the recruiter and technical divide that you were talking about, Nick. Same thing happens in cyber.
Yep.
So in cyber, kind of talking from my domain over here, we really need to be bolstering the pipeline from IT into cyber, correcting the overall misunderstanding that a lot of aspiring professionals have that they don't need IT experience to get into cyber. We need to correct that, and we need to focus on really funneling in these new professionals into IT and focus on training those new professionals when they're in their IT roles for the end up specialization that they want to go for, whether that be cyber, infrastructure, IAM, or management, any number of them. There's a ton. So that's where I think that's how we fix the overall industry, in my view. Bring in more people to IT and prep them for their more advanced roles later in life. What do you guys think?
I think there could also be just better communication about what is possible, right? Like, I think a big I don't want to say I don't know, an issue I've had in my career. It's not really an issue, but a challenge. A challenge I've had in my career is like, what options do I have, right? Because when I started, I didn't even really understand what corporate like help desk really did because I hadn't had a corporate job before, and that was kind of really my intro. Is like my very first technical role. I learned what corporate IT did, and I was like, oh, okay, well, could be a good next step. But then there are so many other different roles within IT, like even if you want to like trending towards DevOps or trending towards like SRE or even just infrastructure versus security versus desktop support. Like there's so many things that you can do and that you can specialize in. There are people that only do storage, right? That's their thing. They're storage engineers. That's all they work on. I didn't even know that until I was like in corporate IT for a couple years, right? So that's, and then not to even to mention all the support aspects of it, right? Because we get support from all these various companies. There have to be people that are specialized in those technologies at those companies that we're getting support from, right? So like it's just that you don't know. I don't think anyone's out here really talking about a lot of the different opportunities that you have. I don't know, maybe from a career coaching standpoint, right? There may be people discussing that, but at least for me, I found it very kind of obtuse what I could do, and I think that's a problem that we have as well. At least that's a challenge in the market is, what can people do? What can they learn? I think there should be I think the certification paths from Microsoft and from AWS and places like that have helped because there's more of a clear like, oh, if I'm good in this, maybe I should check out doing this, right? As prerequisite certs and things like that. But at least from outside of that, there doesn't really seem to be much talk about, unless you're already in the industry and what your opportunities are. And I think that could be a big thing that would help get people, more into roles where they can succeed, as if they even know what's possible. So
yeah, no, and that's a good point. There are a ton of specializations in IT and cyber. I feel like the best way to determine those and determine which direction you want to move in is to really I started as an IT generalist. I started as an IT generalist and then found my specialization really in cybersecurity. But going in as a generalist, and I do agree with you, once you're in as a generalist, there should be more discussion and more opportunity for discussion around the industry around what specializations are now open to you because you're in the IT field. And every IT generalist does get to a spot where they have an opportunity to specialize.
Right.
Sometimes it's technical specialty and you want to go infrastructure, networks, storage. Sometimes it's a split between management and IT and splitting away from the technical side of things to go be more of a people manager.
Yeah.
Now, Nick, I know that you've been kind of in the you've been going through quite a bit. What's your experience been?
It's kind of been that. It's been a lot of, I feel like I am essentially reaching the point now where I have this, it's not just a fork in the road. It's like a 1,000 different forks in the road. And they did kind of, I'm coming up to the point where, I need to decide if I want to specialize, what specialization path I'm going to go down. And I mean, you guys know, because we've talked about this personally before, but like, I am very interested in security, and I've chosen security as the route that I want to take. And that's, what I've been doing. I've been building up my security skills. I've been getting certs. I've been just continuing to develop myself so that, I am ready when the opportunity presents itself. And I've actually got a interesting little question for both of you, but kind of primarily for Anthony. Do you think that there is like a demand or a market for maybe some of these more explicitly transitional roles? So like something that, does bridge the gap between an IT position and a security position. Like perhaps it's, maybe just more junior analyst roles, or it's a more security focused IT role, something like that. Like, do you think that companies would want to, hire and pay people to be in these positions? And do you also think that the candidates themselves would want to work those jobs.
I'm going to give you the most cybersecurity answer here possible. It depends.
Knew you were going to say that.
There it is. Yeah.
It depends on the situation. So, and it's a great question though. And it goes back to, where is the organization's responsibility? If I am hiring for a cybersecurity role, do I also have to take on the responsibility to train one of my new hires in IT or computer systems first to get them that baseline, to then train them in security? Because, that might be a 6-9 month ramp up time. Yeah. Versus taking someone that has a few years of IT and I don't really need to train that. I can spend the first 3 months training cybersecurity for their job role, and then they can learn from there. So that is really where we start to hit. And that's why the IT experience, in my opinion, is so important, is without that IT experience, you're missing some of that foundation, and it puts too much of a burden on organizations for training if you have to start from a lower position. Not to mention, then this is before we even start to factor in, again, all of that liability and responsibility that comes with it. So it's like putting in a more green candidate that needs to learn a lot more before they're effective, but then they're still in a position where you don't really get the same opportunity to make mistakes in IT or in cyber. And so, to your point, I think that junior analyst roles definitely play a big part in cyber, and I think that we do need to have a focus on pulling people into cyber. Junior analyst roles are still a couple of years in IT. The way I see it, and this is rough and it depends everywhere, but a couple of years in IT, that's right around the time I would look to probably pull in a junior analyst. 4 years, maybe 5 years IT, that's an analyst right there. If you're even kind of starting to get into, I would say like 3 to 5 years, you're analyst there, and then above 5 years, you're starting to get into engineer territory. Cybersecurity engineer, because you've done 5 years of IT, you've built systems, you've worked in it. Obviously, it depends on your experience, depends on the work that you've been doing. Like, everything depends. But just as a rough scale, that's kind of where my scale is at right now, and I'm always open to learning and changing it. But that IT experience just brings such critical background of obviousness in your roles in cybersecurity that lacking that can really set you behind. Now, I do want to cap off here today talking about we've talked about how hard it is to get into the industry. We've talked about some of the gaps that we see. We talk about some of the challenges that we're facing. Okay, what can we do about it? What can aspiring professionals do to break into the industry? Whether that is, IT or cyber. I'll get us kicked off with this one because I've already given the example. That
I was going to say, if you know the answer, I'd love to hear it. So,
well, I've already given one of the examples. It's the employee that I hired that worked on ECUs, but when he came over, like on car computers, like he came over, but he had a full website showing all that he had done. He had shown the passion for IT and cyber because he was doing it on his own time, because he was putting in the work, he was putting in the effort. He showed that he was marketing himself because they had a website that I was able to pull up off of his resume, be like, wow, this guy doesn't have a ton of experience, but open up, whoa, he's done a ton of stuff in cybersecurity. That kind of stuff. Marketing yourself, as well as, I want to dispel any thought or idea that the IT and cyber world is something that you can do and be successful in without really leaning in. If you want to break into the markets, if you want to be successful in these career fields, it's not about just clocking in for your 9 to 5, maybe getting a cert here or there, like on the clock or whatever like that. You have to lean in and put time off the clock to show that you're passionate about it, to show that you're interested in learn, and you're continuously bringing yourself on your own volition to learn about cybersecurity and cybersecurity foundations. You're doing projects and you're broadcasting what you're doing as well. That significantly helps, and it's not a guaranteed. There are so many other variables with it. But if you really want to break into cyber in particular, put out there what you're doing in your free time that demonstrates your passion, that demonstrates what you have learned and what you have the drive and dedication to learn when there's no pressure on you to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I mean, that encapsulates it, right? Is like, if you don't have drive, people are going to see that probably. And I think a big thing that people are looking for, hiring managers particularly, and I say this, from my own experience, is culture alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
One phrase that keeps coming into my head that you guys have mentioned a few times, that you can teach technical skill, right? Anyone can cook.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can cook. And it's true, right? There are certain intangibles that you can't teach. And I feel like that is a huge part of what sets people aside from other candidates in the pool is, oh, wow, it really seems like they are, they're passionate about learning, right? Passion, the term comes up again, but they're dedicated to learning, right? You want to see that as a hiring manager in whatever field or subset that you're looking for, whether that's an engineer level position or a green position or even a management level position. Like, that's still what we look for, is how, what level of commitment does this person seem to have to wanting to continue to grow and to have learned what they do know already. So I think for me, that's a big part of it, right? Is what you basically just said, but also, I mean, get certified. That's an
Mm-hmm.
easy one, right?
That's a great call. Yep. Yeah, it's
It's an
still
easy
important.
one. I think the barrier to entry as far as like IT certifications is lower than it has ever been right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to set yourself aside, you should be seriously considering how a certification could help you in what role that you want to get. If it's technical, they probably have a certification you can get for that technology, right? If it's managerial, you might need to look like at something large like the CISSP or something like that, where you're focusing on leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you look at a degree or something like that could further advance your career. I mean, I don't have a degree, right? So I don't think you
No,
guys
neither do I.
have one either, right? Nick, do you have a degree?
Yeah, not tech though. So I went to school for economics.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So that that's if you're in management, that could be an option, right? But you have to, regardless of what you are doing, there has to be a way that sets you aside from everybody else, and it can't just be how good you are at interviewing, because you're not going to get that far if the papers don't show that you're dedicated or that you're passionate or that you've been doing something else to try to further your knowledge and experience. So that's my take.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And yeah, get certed. That is a part of you leaning in and putting time in your own during your own time. Get the additional certifications, build out your qualifications, and yeah, show that passion. Nick, did you have anything to add here?
I mean, you guys kind of covered it. I think one thing that I would like to add that I personally at least think is maybe one of the most important traits that anyone can have who would want to enter IT or security or is already in there is just having an innate sense of curiosity.
Yes.
Because you are always going to, come up against things that you don't understand how they work, but if you have that internalized desire to understand how they work and figure it out, that's going to take you very far. And kind of also tying back into something you said earlier, Anthony, like just always be learning. You gotta always be learning. Learning is not just for school. That's really, actually, I would say probably the most important thing that I took away from my security boot camp that I did was just hammering it into myself that you want to be a lifelong learner. You should always be learning new skills, learning new, even if it's just facts, like just keep learning, and that will also carry you very far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well,
I
I would even go to say that if you're not learning, especially in IT and cyber fields, you're starting to fall behind.
Yeah.
You really need to be constantly learning and constantly evolving just to stay ahead in this field.
Technology evolves fast,
very
really
quickly.
fast.
So, certs, show your passion, show what you're doing outside of the working hours that shows that passion, that dedication to get to the field, the interest. Market yourself, upskill, and I guess I think the interpersonal side, we could say that succinctly. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
That'll carry you quite a ways as well. So
being someone that other people want to work with.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
All right, well, that is about all the time that we have for today. Pierce, Nick, thank you. You guys are going to be back on the show, so we'll see you again soon.
Of course, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. And to our listeners, we'll be back next week. Got a great show planned for you guys next week, so looking forward to it. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, weekend, whenever you're listening.